I know I've referenced many times on the podcast that I have two sons, Tyler and Caden, and I've also talked about their love of video games. Go back to the GameStop interview with Paul Raines, probably one of my favorite interviews. It's not every day that a CEO of a very large organization calls out his nemesis, pork fat, but that's exactly what he did. And I think that was probably one of the highlights of my podcasting career. But you know what? I also have a wife of 22 years. We met in high school, believe it or not, and we've been together ever since. And I've got a beautiful 15-year-old daughter, Alicia. And guess what? They like beauty products, like a lot of women. And my daughter doesn't wear a lot of makeup. Quite frankly, she doesn't need to, but she spends a whole lot of time shopping for it and then trying it out. And you know what? I'm personally fascinated. What drives people to love one product over another? Now, I would argue that the beauty industry is probably fairly saturated. So why do women, why do men, why do everyone gravitate to one product versus another? And today I am fired up to be sitting down with Mike Indursky. Mike is the former CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of Burt's Bees, and then the president of Bliss World. Now, it's funny, when I mentioned Bliss, my wife and daughter, for once in my life, actually, I think, thought I was cool. They love their products. And, if there is a brand that has a more passionate fan base, you don't need to look any further than Burt's Bees. And I'm really looking forward to my conversation with Mike. And I have a hunch after doing a bunch of research that he's one of those creative geniuses that likes to do things just a little bit differently than the pack.
If you're not ruffling some feathers, you're not making a difference. If you're not making a difference, you're not being different. If you're not being different, you're not making a difference. You have to make a difference. And when you make a difference, it's going to change people. And it has to provoke some type of response. You like them to all be positive, but there's going to be some negative ones too.
Welcome to Resilient, our little podcast where we feature stories from leaders on risk, crisis, and disruption. And when I'm talking about leaders, I'm talking about CEOs, board members, other leaders, and even folks outside of the business world who I believe have something very valuable to teach us about resilience. And we get those stories by jumping on a plane. I'll tell you, yesterday was a pretty bumpy one from San Francisco to New York, and we meet our guests on their home turf. My name's Mike Kearney. I'm a partner in Deloitte Strategic Risk Practice. And I get the question all the time, why did we start Resilient? I will tell you, it's actually pretty simple. When I talk to clients want to hear from the front lines. They want to hear the stories of people who have lived through crisis, people who've lived through risk events, people who've been disrupted or have disrupted. They want to hear the stories. While they like to hear Deloitte's perspective, they're absolutely fascinated. So it has been my quest to go out and find these leaders who want to share their stories in an authentic, conversational manner. We don't script these. Quite frankly, we don't even know how long they're going to go. It could be an hour, it could be an hour and a half, but that's what I want. I want the authentic story from these leaders. And I'll tell you, it has been one of the coolest roles that I've ever had. The fact that I get to sit there and ask these leaders any question I want. And I have learned so much that I've integrated into how I serve clients, how I think, both professionally and personally. It has been a highlight of my career. And today I am in New York, in Manhattan, and actually in Soho. And what's really interesting is Mike is inviting us into his home. So when I'm telling you that we go and see them on their home turf, we're actually going to be in Mike's home today, which is really neat. And I'll tell you, when I first talked to Mike, I felt an instant connection with him. He seems like somebody that really gets it, really gets how you market, really gets how you put messages out that distinguish his company or his products from others. So I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Today, we're going to talk to him about, working at some iconic brands, Burt's Bees and Bliss. We're going to talk what it's like to be this little offbeat cult-like company to be acquired by the 1,000-pound gorilla, Clorox, how a disruptive, and I'm going to call him a disruptive CMO, how he actually thinks. We're going to talk about natural products, some of the risks associated with them, and why the definition of beauty is changing. And then we'll close it out with his latest adventure. I want to start with kind of a fun little story that you actually cite, and I'm actually really curious if you believe this, but it's one of your greatest accomplishments, and that's winning the Battle of the Bands in 2007, so it's already 10 years ago, and I think you said after hearing 8 performances that you indicated, we're not going to win, and I think your quote was, and I'm going to recite this, and I want you to react to it. You said, "Look, guys, we're not going to win on talent. We're not that good." But we will win by playing faster and harder. And remember, if you make a mistake, you did it on purpose. You got to tell us a story.
Yeah, they had this Battle of the Bands competition in North Carolina, and we were working at Burt's Bees, and we decided we should do this. And some of us had never played in front of people before. We had different skill levels, and as the boss, you can't handpick people. If everyone wants to play, you let them play. So we put this band together. And our rehearsals were horrendous. Our rehearsals were, everyone wanted to do their own thing. One person's playing folk and one person's playing this. Getting them to remember the music and practice, that wasn't going to happen. But it just kind of worked out. And we looked good. We had the creative team put together these shirts. We looked like the Ramones, but of course it was the Bee-Mones because we were from Burt's Bees. Yep. And we had a big banner behind us. So we looked the part, and we felt really good going in because we took Ramon songs like "I Want to Be Sedated" but made them be appropriate. So I want to be pollinated, or Rock and Roll High School became Rock and Roll B School. And we had a lot of fun with it. And when we went on, we were just brimming with confidence, but clearly we were the least talented of all the people. So I said, "Guys, we're not going to win this on talent, okay, because we kind of suck. But we're going to have the best time. We're going to kick ass," and everything you said was happened. And we went on, and people who had never played in front of people before were so confident, cocky, and we killed it. We crushed everybody.
What do you think is there a deeper lesson there? Because it's one of your best accomplishments. Is it, I don't know, bringing creativity into a situation, the level of confidence or cockiness, like you said?
Yeah,
what's the lesson?
I think it's like, look, everything is kind of a default no. Everything in life is you can't do it, can't be done, shouldn't be done. And the only person who's going to make it happen is you, right? You're the only one who's going to say yes to things.
Right.
So when you have this idea right away, well, it's a dumb idea. It's been done before. It failed before. And you have to have the strength of conviction, if you really believe in it, to make it happen. And that means going through a lot of naysayers. And, here it was persuading a bunch of people to do the Ramones, which was kind of hard for people because if they play really fast,
right,
convincing them was a great idea, them seeing it, creating a vision for them, which we did, and they followed the vision, and to make it happen. And to realize that I want to win Battle of the Bands, you can win Battle of the Bands. I want to be a boxer, you're a boxer. I want to be CEO of a company, you're CEO of a company. The only one's going to make it happen is you.
Yeah, in many respects, it's interesting because you, I guess one of my big takeaways, it wasn't just about how you played. You talked about the fact that just even the Bee-Mones, that's pretty damn creative. What you wore, it to a certain degree, it was more than just the music. It sounds like it was also the broader experience that you brought to it.
Yeah, the whole idea was we really wanted to get into the mindset of what the Ramones were, but in a funny way. We even the Ramones had Johnny and Joey and Tommy and Dee Dee. We had Buzzy and Stingy and Hy-Vee, and we had names like that. So we had it down. We actually had a shrine. Joey Ramone had died, I think, about 3 years to the day. And bizarrely, coincidentally, 3 years to the day of that concert.
Wow!
And we had a shrine for him on the stage. And you try to be Johnny. I was singing and playing lead guitar, so I was trying to be Johnny, but I sounded more like Andrew Dice Clay with this really bad Queen's accent.
You say in the quote, though, you said, if you make a mistake, you did it on purpose. Is that kind of your perspective on mistakes? Because I actually think you learn a lot more from mistakes than successes.
Well, it's funny. I think in any musician will tell you if they're on stage, if you make a mistake, and you fixate on it, it can paralyze you. So if you make a mistake, just keep going. You did it on purpose, So
when I screw up on this podcast, I'm just going to keep going.
Exactly.
That's my strategy.
Exactly. When you drop the F-bomb multiple times, I meant to do that. I'm trying to add some more character to this.
This is not your typical Deloitte podcast. Exactly right.
But it is. But I think in the world of mistakes, I think, there's so much to talk about there, but you're going to make them. try to learn from them. Just try not to learn from them multiple times.
Right.
Learn from them once and act. And at the same time, also, don't ignore them.
Right.
You know, in the case of the music, you're on stage. You have to keep going. You can't fixate on a mistake. It could also screw you up mentally. But, you know, you learn from your mistake. Don't do it again. Move on. But definitely learn from it.
Why do you think people are afraid of making mistakes?
Because it goes against their ego. That you know, I mean, and that's not good for a leader. You have to admit you're wrong, show the right way, and take them there.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you say that. I think actually a superpower of many leaders that I track is when they actually say, I'm sorry, or I made a mistake. And I actually say with my kids a lot of times, if you just admit what you did, it actually deactivates any sense of frustration I may have with that person.
Absolutely. You know, when you're on top, you have the highest level of power. And any sign of weakness could, in someone's mind, kind of compromise that power. But someone who's like highly emotionally intelligent and secure and has a good leadership style will admit to it. And that allows everyone to admit to mistakes. So it makes for a much better environment altogether.
So are the B-Moans still around?
The B-Moans aren't around, but I didn't realize it was 10 years, almost 10 years to the day, because I think it was about May. So I might have to try to see if we can get the band back together.
Can I get an invite if you do that?
Absolutely get an invite together.
I'll follow up with you.
The invite might be, you might also be the only one in the audience.
Well, I know you show me another performance that we're not going to get into. I don't think that's going to be true. So let's talk about your youth. I always love starting with kind of what makes the person the person. So you grew up in the Bronx. Maybe if you could just give a bit of your backstory.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bronx. It was like, not a bad area, but I had a weird situation where my mom worked days, my dad worked nights, and my dad was a bartender. He owned a bar in Harlem, and that led to just a lot of kind of weird adventures for us, and getting exposed to things at a young age that most kids don't get exposed to. And between getting tied up at gunpoint with you and your mom and dad when you're 16 and, literally have a gun to your head saying, you better stay down there or I'll effing kill you, to having friends killed and having my godfather shot in the back of the head and just witnessing a ton of violence. There's also New York back in the, late 70s. If you ever watch movies, like early 70s rather, to late 70s. If you watch movies like Taxi Driver and French Connection, that was New York. That wasn't a period piece. That was happening at the time. But the point of it is you're exposed to a lot of really weird situations. You're exposed to a lot of just a lot of experience that just kind of helps you later in life. But to me, that was just kind of my normality. That was life in New York. That was life.
Is there one or two things? Because I was going to ask you about like what shaped you, but obviously that's probably what shaped you when you were a kid. But people could have gone, or you could have gone one of two ways, or many different ways. But it seems like you turned out all right. Were there one or two lessons that you learned or things that you've taken forward?
My biggest decision about like where to go in life was probably, at the time, like in like the late 70s, you had to choose between either punk or disco. And there was really your two choices. And if you're a good-looking guy and you thought you were relatively easy to meet women, you went the disco version. And if you were kind of unsure of yourself or angry at the world, you kind of went the punk route. So I went the punk route. Thank God New Wave came along, which put disco and punk together nicely and made everyone happy and dancing and wearing really cool clothes. I think my parents always had very good standards and high standards. They're both entrepreneurs and they both did their own thing, and they instilled that in me and my brother. So it was always going in the right direction. It's just a question of where.
Right. I would characterize you as kind of a creative guy based on what I've seen. Were you always drawn to the creative side, or were you an artist, or where did it begin?
Well, interestingly, my brother is an artist, and he's just real super talented guy, and he can draw well and paint and all those things. I was never as good as he was, so I always thought of myself as not being particularly creative because it was relative to him. And what I didn't realize was two things: that the lens you look at isn't other people, per se, it's yourself.
Right.
And also creativity takes many different forms, and it's not just the guy who can draw well or paint well. So it took me a lot later in life to understand that I really am a very creative guy. But I didn't know that.
You didn't know that when you were young?
No, I didn't know that till much later in life, actually. I went to, when I was at Unilever, they sent the senior managers to this thing called the Center for Creative Leadership. And it's
in South Carolina, right? Or
I've
been there.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I went to the one that was in San Diego, but they have two.
Yeah.
And they do this whole 360 on you, psych tests and IQ tests, and at the end, you're learning about yourself. And I remember you speak to the counselor at the end, where she puts it all together for you. And her first comment to me was, "Why are you so hard on yourself?" And I said, "Why am I so hard on myself?" And she gave me examples. And then she goes, I talked about being humble. And she goes, if you can't recognize what you're great at, you'll never be great. You have to recognize what you're great at, embrace it, make that the focal point in your career. And similarly, recognize what you stink at, stay away from that, delegate that to other people. And it's okay to stink at stuff. And, when you're going up as a general manager, you have to be good at everything.
Right.
But what I realized was, creativity is an incredibly strong suit of mine. Be very proud of that, and don't be humble about it, because it's not about bragging. It's about recognizing it, throwing yourself into situations where creativity is needed, and not shy away from it.
Yeah, our firm, I think I mentioned this on our last interview that I did, but we've moved big time to the whole strengths-based focus.
Absolutely.
It is so liberating because I had a leader that used to call, don't peanut butter it. Like, you can't do everything. And the notion that I can actually focus on what I'm good at is empowering. And actually, I take that. That's quite frankly why I'm doing this podcast. It's maybe I'm not good at it, but it's what I'm interested in, what gives me passion.
I think you're fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
No, but they've done all these studies about happiness in the workplace, and doing and being able to work on the things that are your strengths is one of the greatest contributors to happiness in the workplace. The biggest frustration is if you have a strength and you can't use it.
Right.
And everyone wants to be cross-trained and cross this and cross that. But at the end of the day, like if you have you have a creative ad guy, and he has a teammate who's a creative account guy, and they tell the creative guy, listen, we need you stink with math, so we're going to send you to financial courses. And they tell the account guy, you're great with math, but you stink at creative. We're taking you to creativity workshops. It's just the worst use of resource.
Right.
Instead, let the creative guy be the best creative. Let the business guy be the best business guy. Let them be yin-yang together and form a perfect union. But don't try to do each other's stuff. But not focusing on your strengths is going to hurt you. And all these people take jobs and they take positions that aren't to their strengths, but they think it's going to help them later in their career. It just makes them miserable in the short term.
Right. Did this shape you as a leader? And we're going to talk about your time at Burt's Bees and also at Bliss. But that notion after you did that Center for Creative Leadership, did that shape how you led in the future as well?
Oh my God, yeah. Oh my God. It was I think probably the biggest change in me, because it's the first time I became self-aware. The second time, and also taught me the importance of being self-aware. I remember the one thing she told me, I remember the last thing I'll mention is, she said, who are your heroes in life? Not including your parents or relatives. And I said, Teddy Roosevelt, Ayn Rand, Frank Zappa, Marvin Hagler. And she says, yeah, you're the rugged individualist. I said, what? You're the rugged individualist. How have you not started your own company by now? I said, damn, that's good.
This is a good plug for them. That is really insightful.
It was the best week I've ever had professionally. I think about a third to half the people just broke down and cried because they saw themselves. Can you imagine if you look in the mirror every day and someone says, oh, that's not you. This is you. And they show you a different mirror and you see yourself and you look different, you sound different. People think of you differently than you thought. That's a hard thing. Now, here's the challenge. The challenge is you've now been stripped down to nothing. You're naked. You see all your flaws. You see all the good stuff. And you go back to the office, and are you willing to accept this new thing that you are, or do you go back? And in my observation, most people go back because it's just so much more comfortable. Rationalization.
So what did you do?
Rationalization is a great skill to have.
I agree, and I have another question I want to ask you, but before I even get there, what allowed you not to go back to the way things were? If you say that most people do, what allowed you to kind of reach your potential or focus
Oh
on
my
things?
God, it's for that reason, to reach your potential. It's like I had.
But
no
why you and not the other people?
I don't know why they didn't. I just think when you've been doing it for a long time and you've been successful and you've gotten to a certain level of hierarchy, you say, well, you know what, this stuff is good. I learn a couple of things. I'll be better in meetings. I'll do this or I'll do that. But they're not going to go through a fundamental change, because what got them there was actually worked. What they're trying to tell you, Center of Creative Leadership and places like that, is that's fine for now. Doesn't mean, A, that you're successful where you are, nor does it mean you're going to advance from where you are.
Right.
And I was just like, I just want to keep going. Forget about going up. I want to keep going.
Right. Developing personally.
Developing and growing as a person and growing as a business person, as an individual. So, yeah, this is great stuff.
It seemed like to a certain degree you found your purpose. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I realized what I want to do and what motivates me shortly after that.
Yep.
And it's helped give me some type of focus.
Yeah, the reason why I bring up purpose, probably it's because my favorite thing, and I talk about it probably in every interview, but the transformation I went through, and I think it was actually after I went to the Center for Creative Leadership, mine was something called the Corporate Athlete. And they focused a lot on, like, what is your purpose in life? Not at Deloitte or, in the work world, but what is it that really gives you juice? Yeah. And for me, it ultimately was, it's evolving, but at the time it was like to do epic stuff. Mine's a little more evocative, but I'll keep it clean for now. And that has actually guided every single thing that I do now. Like I weekly will sit down and say, did I live my life this week in line with my purpose? And so to me, that's way more transformational than, like you said, I could change the way I go to meetings or things like that. It's kind of more of a life's purpose.
Absolutely.
Point of view.
I think it's a great way of putting it. And I went through the same thing. Interestingly, and that was probably in the late 90s. God, am I dating myself? But in November of this past year, I was invited to a Tony Robbins seminar called Date with Destiny. Now, I met Tony at the premiere of his movie.
That documentary?
Yeah.
That was a fascinating documentary.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. And I met him and we started talking. I told him that we shared the same ethos. And he said how. I told him living a life of positivity and all these other things. And we went back and forth, and he knew my background. He said, I'd like you to come to my Date with Destiny as my guest. So I went for a week long, and it was...
Was this the one down in like Boca or somewhere down in Florida?
Exactly, Boca.
Yep.
And it was wild, absolutely wild. But without going into what happened there, one thing they make you focus on is what's your mission in life? What are your we call it power values? What are the values that you go away from? Your power virtues, rather. What are the values you go towards? What are the values you go away from? And even though some of those are already in my head, to actually put them on paper and recite them every morning, which I actually do as part of this thing he calls getting into peak state. And as trite as it sounds, when you start off the day trying to get into a peak state and reminding yourself who you are, what drives you, what your mission statement is, why it's going to be such a fantastic day and so forth. It's a very, very good process, but it also helps solidify and, like you said, put the guardrails on your decisions.
Do you mind sharing what your mission is?
Yeah, my mission is kind of like yours. It's I love to create great things, big things that are going to hopefully change the world, and work with amazing people to make that stuff come to life, and to make come to life in such a way that it enriches me, enriches my family, and enriches the people that it touches. That's what gets me excited.
That is awesome. So you went to college. Do you want to maybe share where you went to college? What I'm curious of is where you went to college and then where you kind of started your career. A lot of this is going to focus on your time at Burt's Bees and also Bliss, but I want to find out about the foundation.
Sure. Well, I kind of bounced around. I was kind of directionless. I went to Stony Brook, which is a state school in New York, for 2 years. Wound up losing my housing privileges there. And then I went to McGill University. Lasted there about a semester. That's in Montreal, and I was just not in the mood. I was not in the right frame of mind to be in any school, and I was taking every major, not really liking anything. I liked professors, and I liked some courses, but couldn't find a major that I liked. Then I took a year off, and then I worked a bunch of jobs,
Yep.
and then I went to Baruch, which is a city school, and I took a marketing course, and that's when I said, "Oh my God, this is it!
This is it,
marketing." Yep. And it turns out that neither Stony Brook didn't have marketing courses. I don't think McGill did either. So, I kind of discovered it, and my whole kind of seriousness in studying switched. I became a super serious student. My first two schools, I got by. I got by being a kind of smart guy and, getting through with a good grade point average without really trying all that hard, but I didn't really care.
Right.
Now I cared and loved marketing. And from that point on, it was like marketing is what I want to do. Marketing and then, building brands and building businesses, that really excites me.
And that literally flipped the switch for you, finding that thing that you actually were interested in.
Absolutely.
Any advice for kids? Because that's actually, I've got a junior, and we're trying to figure out what the hell he's going to do. But it's hard because you've got to figure that out. And to a certain degree, maybe you got to stumble across a few things to come to the answer.
Yeah, well, I think I haven't been following the advances in higher education, so I don't know what colleges do. Friends of mine have kids, and some of what the schools do are just incredible.
Yep.
But to me, it's when you go to school, it's a menu, and don't choose the steak right away. Try everything. Well, even though if you're not interested in it, try it. Just try it for a semester. Pre-med, pre-law, business, engineering, whatever those, try everything. You'll get a sense of what's right for you.
Yep.
Then you can start narrowing it down. But to declare your major so early, without, when you come out of high school, I don't know if you've experienced enough, and how many jobs have you had. Take everything you can. Take the burden off yourself. Don't feel the need I need to know right away, even if it takes you 2 years. But once you get a taste of something that works, you'll know it right away.
So then after college, you maybe just touch on Unilever and L'Oreal. Like you had some great experiences before you came to Burt's Bees.
Yeah, I loved it. I when I got out of grad school, I worked when I got out of grad school, which was Leonard Stern School for Business, NYU. I was lucky because I'd worked 5 years between college and grad school, which was seen as a real big asset. So I was really kind of on top of the list of people getting offers. So I got all these offers, and I chose this company called Chesebro Ponds, and Chesebro Ponds was in Connecticut, and they were just bought by Unilever.
Okay.
So I joined Chesebro, and what I liked about Chesebro, it wasn't necessarily the products, because they had like AIM toothpaste, and they had Vaseline intensive care lotion, and Q-tips, and Aquanet, and Rave, and all this stuff, Ponds. It wasn't that. It was the people. This is another kind of interesting thing. Every place I interviewed, everyone seemed so homogenous. It seemed like a group of the same person. And Chesebro is like snowflakes. They were all different. It was like wonderfully different.
Yeah.
You had like assistants who wound up getting into marketing. You had people from who were perfume people, and you had classic marketers. You had all different types of people there. It was a very entrepreneurial environment. I mean, it was big highs, big lows, but you can get the big highs. It's like a pendulum. But I just loved the variety of people, and I said I could fit here. I can't fit in a homogenous group because I never felt in my life I ever fit with any homogenous group.
Right.
But I always felt a little bit of an outsider, just a very gregarious, kind of popular outsider. But in a kind of a diverse group, I fit right in. You're just another slice in the pie. So I felt very good in there. So I expected to be there for about 2-3 years. And I'm going to start my own company was my guess. And 11 and a half years later, I was actually there for almost 12 years.
Do you think, so it's interesting you say that, what's going through my mind is there value in being that snowflake in that homogenous pool because you can differentiate yourself versus it sounded like now you were kind of an outsider, but you were kind of in a pool of outsiders. So maybe you weren't that differentiated. Did that ever factor into your thinking or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I think that if I was in one of the more traditional companies, I probably would always be seen as, is that wacky guy, Mike. And I think I was probably seen that way at Unilever too, as that wacky guy, Mike. But it was more embraced because
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
because everyone had their own degree of being, different, and that was all tolerable.
Interesting. So then you go to, was it L'Oreal after that?
Yeah,
or?
I wound up, I ended my career at Unilever as Senior Vice President of Strategic Planning and Marketing for the fragrance group, was Calvin Klein,
Yep.
Vera Wang, Cerruti, Chloe Valentino, a bunch of those brands. And it was wonderful. And I decided I wanted to stay in beauty, and I decided that I wanted to actually do more in beauty. And L'Oreal, in my opinion, at the time, was the best beauty company. They were the biggest. They were the most successful. Strategically, they have the best portfolio of brands across different types of beauty, different channels of distribution, internationally and gender-wise, than any company. They're just perfectly balanced and perfectly smart. So I joined them for 3 years. And I went there originally to be the vice president of marketing for Maybelline. And then after about a year, they moved me to Garnier. And Garnier had just launched. And they had someone there, and it was year 2, and they wanted to try to up their game a little bit, and they moved me over. And it was a wonderful experience. L'Oreal is a very interesting company. They actually do, at the time, a lot more research than even Unilever did, which was surprising. I thought Unilever was research heavy. They did more research. But what you learn there is the importance of proper execution. And we would have debates over the size of the writing on the bottom of a tube of lipstick, where I first came in and go, who the hell cares?
Right.
They would say that's the difference between having a shelf that looks clean and a shelf that looks sloppy, because you have to make sure that the customer and the clerk can put back that lipstick and know where it goes instead of trying to search for it. So you learn everything from something as practical as that to having what they call this métier, which is this great understanding of things that are aesthetic.
Would that impact your creativity, though? That seems like a very rote way of marketing or branding, or I don't know. I'm not a marketing guy, but I could see you in those meetings probably pulling out your hair.
There were times where you pull out your hair. Absolutely. There's times you pull out your hair. And also culturally was, L'Oreal at the time I thought was a challenging company. It was a good challenging company. And I really look very fondly at my interactions with who's the CEO, Jean-Paul Gaunt, who's just incredible. But at times you can be wildly creative, but you need to be able to back up your creativity with fact and data. And L'Oreal, it's interesting, as artistic as, maybe that's not a good word, as they were, it was about the research. You could assert anything, but prove it to me.
Right.
Don't just tell me, show me, as one of the lines that be used in meetings. Don't just tell me, show me. So, but you learn a lot there. But having said that, though, after 3 years, I decided that that's not the place I want to be.
And then you moved to Burt's Bees.
And it wasn't so much a slight on L'Oreal. Again, I was very happy there. I was doing very well there, and they liked me very much there. But I went back to, again, who am I and what do I want? What's my mission? And I also realized that the environment that I thrive most in is an environment of creativity, of high risk, of diversity, of a lot of things like that. And I also wanted to work I was very interested in private equity at the time. And I kind of put it out there in the spirit world, and I swear within 2 weeks I got a call from Burt's Bees. It was just like that.
So let me ask you, before we get into Burt's Bees, which I'm fascinated by, but you said you thrive in an environment of high risk.
Yeah. And
so the question I have for you is given the fact that you'll ultimately run a company, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but can you give, so let me back up. I come from a risk world. Okay. And probably the question that fascinates me more than anything is not necessarily how a risk professional thinks about risk. It's how a business leader thinks about risk. And my hypothesis, it's not even a hypothesis, I think I'm beginning to prove it, is that they are diametrically opposed in many circumstances. Meaning, like, if you're, the president or CEO or even a CMO, I need to take risks in order to grow this company or to achieve our objectives. But there's a balance. And maybe if you could just touch on quickly, when you talk about like a high threshold for risk, what does that mean to you?
Well, a high threshold for risk means that rules are getting broken every day.
Mm-hmm.
And when rules are broken, rules are reshaped, and industries are reshaped by them. You're seeing it happening right now in retail, right? You're seeing it happen in beauty. You're seeing it in indie brands versus established brands. You're seeing it in bloggers versus editors.
Right.
You're seeing it in all parts. You're seeing it in new types of politicians versus old types of politicians. Rules are being broken every day. And if you're not leading it, which is one degree of risk, and you're not quickly following it, which is a lower degree risk but still risky, you might wind up being obsolete. And it's shocking that these major CPG brands, about 90% of the top CPG brands have lost share year after year in the last 3 or 4 years, all at the expense of indie brands.
Yep.
So if you're not doing something different, you're going to wind up failing. And the world's moving faster and faster. So the people say, well, this is the rule, and this is the way we need to do things, which I understand. But, when it comes to rules, you have to know why the rules are there. And then of the rules, which ones do you bend? Which ones do you break? Which ones do you adhere to? Which ones do you ignore? But you have to know that stuff. So I'm not saying just make crazy, wild decisions, but it's with all those things in mind.
But I think sometimes, and I think this is what you're getting at, not all rules are created the same.
No.
Sometimes rules within organizations are kind of self-imposed, or they're put in place for a very good reason, but then they hold back potentially the creativity. And those are the type of rules maybe to push on.
Yeah, I was in a restaurant the other day. Maybe it's a horrible analogy. I was in a restaurant the other day, and it's a Mexican restaurant. It's a high-end Mexican restaurant, and I had choice on the menu. I wanted some tacos. There's either 3 fish, 3 beef, or 3 chicken. And they're all about the same price. I still have 1 of each. I said, we don't do that. I said, well, our rule is you can only have 3 of each. I said, but I want 1 of each. So I'm not asking you for a third of a steak, a third of a chicken, a third of a piece of fish. We're talking about tacos. I know what your kitchen looks like. I know how it's served. It's in big pans with a ladle and just dumping it in there. Well, that's the rule. I said, well, why is it the rule? Because that's how we do it. That doesn't answer my question. Why is that the rule? And it went back and forth. I said, I think that's a dumbass rule. I mean, I'm a customer. You have the food there. I want it. You have it, and you're not going to give it to me. Do you realize you're actually now kind of pissing me off, and to the point where I might not come back here, but just out of sheer stupidity. Right. This is a conversation we're having as lightheartedly as we can. And at the end of the day, I spoke to GM. He goes, yeah, it's the owner. That's what they want to do. That's the rule. I said, but the rule doesn't make it right. So going back to this, why is the rule there? And if you can find out that the basis of foundation for that rule is flawed, then you can challenge that rule and break the rule or bend the rule.
I love that. I mean, I've not had somebody answer the question in that way. And I think what you're saying is there are risks that, well, first of all, there are risks you absolutely have to take because your survival is dependent on it. Right. And what holds us back a lot of times is these self-imposed rules, especially, when you get into very large bureaucratic organizations. And that's probably one of the reasons why they have a challenge at really responding to some of these upstarts.
Yeah. If you look at the magazine industry, and I can't say this in fact, but I can tell you that a lot of people over the years, since like the mid 90s, were saying we need to get more, think about this whole digital thing. Yep. And they said, no, but we're a magazine company. Well, they didn't think, no, we're actually a content company. And if you own content, that's much bigger than I'm a magazine company. So someone drew that rule, well, we're a magazine company. And that wound up hurting a lot of the industry.
So what makes Burt's Bees so special? I know the whole history. It's actually a fascinating backstory. But, you came in probably, about 10 or 15 years after it started? Is that right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah. I came in I came in there almost about a little bit later because I remember we were selling our 25th anniversary. Oh, wow. So I got there in 2005.
Okay.
And it was about a $50 million company. And it was a great company. It was like what the founder had done. Roxanne was incredible. And she got to the point where she didn't want to continue, and she had sold it. And the private equity company was AEA Investors, and they looked for a management team. And after placing the CEO and the CFO, they placed me. And it was really one of those really interesting, weird times where I kind of always liken it to a basketball player when he says the net is like that big, it's so huge you can't miss. The path forward was so obvious to me because the brand was a very cute, quirky brand that kind of happened to be natural, and everyone likes the brand. You mentioned when you work at Burt's Bees, their knees would kind of buckle. Oh, they go, oh, I love Burt's Bees. So the love was there.
Right.
But what they weren't really looking at, in my opinion, was that this trend of natural and well-being and health was like a locomotive, not a locomotive.
So meaning they stumbled, because that was what they were putting out, but they didn't understand how fast it was coming.
It was natural more for goodness and earth than it was about health and where the world was going.
Right.
So I, kind of led the charge to kind of refocus the brand, not relaunch it or restage it, whatever you want to call it, refocus it. We're going to be the natural brand. We're going to put natural on the map, and we're going to still keep its cute kind of personality, but we're not going to lead with being the cute brand. I remember like Altoids was out around the same time.
Yep.
Altoids was this cute mint brand, but it was all about just being cute and provocative. I want it to be more than that. I want it to be the leaders in natural. I want to make a statement about natural. I want to put naturals on the map. And it was so clear to me that's where the direction was. And we were right. And, before you know it, we created a standard for the entire industry, a standard for natural personal care products. We got our competitors to join us, the true competitors, because we were all wanting this thing to win, and we all saw that all of a sudden there were brands coming out there who said they were natural and weren't natural. Big popular brands that are advertised on TV, which have a lot of leaves on the front, and they have a lot of celebrities talking about it, but they're not natural whatsoever. And then next thing you know, we're working in Washington, and next thing you know, we're working with Walmart, Target, Sephora, Macy's, virtually and creating natural sets. Here's what natural should be.
So there was almost a need to educate the consumer to a large degree.
Absolutely.
Because you're competing against others that probably are saying they're natural as well.
Absolutely. So we did that, and I think between our rapid innovation by focusing on women's needs, one thing which was actually a very big decision in some ways was this iconic Burt. Burt was this old guy with a big beard, and we want to get into the beauty business. And the last thing
he doesn't personify like women beauty, right?
No, the last thing a woman wants to see is a dirty old man when she's putting on her lipstick and things. So I made the decision to pull him off. And interestingly, the founder Roxanne, who came up with that wood carving, thing of him, bust of him, said, "It's a time."
So she was supportive.
She was.
And was she still involved in the?
She was on the board.
Oh, she was. Okay.
And I thought, I'm going to get my ass.
So you go to the board with this presentation, you're like, I'm dead.
Please God. Well, fortunately, I covered with her beforehand. Yeah. It's always smart to talk to the board members before you go to the board meeting, right? You don't want to go, surprise.
Here's what we're doing to your company.
And she supported, but between the innovation, our distribution strategy, which was keep all the products together and don't have them separated into different departments like other brands did. We want this to be this hive of natural goodness, creating the standard and being the thought leaders in natural. Those, and then just the marketing of it really led to the brand just to accelerate even faster than it had grown. And I think, we bought the company for $177 million. We sold it for about $950 in 4 years. So that was a huge increase. To Clorox.
Well, before we get into the Clorox, the acquisition or the sale, how did you balance keeping your existing, really zealot customers happy, but then bringing more people in? Was that a challenge? Or
no?
There's
actually two parts to that. The first part is the bigger challenge, in my opinion, was keeping the company as whole. Because the company,
meaning the culture of the company,
You had one group which was very much rooted in the foundation of the company, and you had another group, the new people who came in, and I would say probably me as being the biggest culprit, who had this vision for changing everything, and it caused a lot of turmoil, or considerable turmoil. And a new CEO came in, John Replogle, and John saw that right away as his biggest opportunity at the time was to put the culture and solidify the culture. And he did a brilliant job at that. And at the end, what's obvious is your brand needs to have its roots in its history, but like a tree, grow to its potential. And it took a lot of workshops to get us there and realize we're all on the same page. But he's the one who did that. And he was
How
great
did he
there.
see that? Because what I hear you saying, it's like respect the past, but look
Yeah.
to the future. Was it obvious to everybody that this was potentially a big risk or issue,
Yeah.
and it needs to be addressed?
I think the previous CEO, who's a really good guy, I think he just felt, look, let's just go forward where we need to go, and I was all good with that. And I think John realized that no, you need to have a company that's cohesive and all following the same vision and same path, so we'll get there faster and not just by brute force, but by inspiration and by shared vision. And then to answer your question on the consumer standpoint, what it really was a person who's a real, let's say, a real kind of crunchy granola person.
Yep.
They'll deal with the trade-offs that a lot of natural products have. They don't smell as good, maybe. They don't work as good, maybe. They don't feel as good, maybe. But it's better for me.
Yep.
And a person who's really kind of crunchy granola, I don't mean that in a pejorative, but they'll deal with that trade-off. But if you want to reach the larger audience, and we did, we had to have a product that was, at minimum, smells as good, works as good, and performs as good as its, let's say, synthetic counterparts. So, in fact, we went to say we want to be even better. So we hired top R&D people from Chanel and Avon and L'Oreal and places like that, brought them in, retaught them how to formulate natural. Because formulating natural is like almost more like cooking than formulating.
Yep.
So the woman who ran our R&D, who's fantastic, who's still there, Celeste Lotrerio, brought in this amazing team and then retaught them how to formulate for natural. So we got our aesthetics way, way up. Some of the original products, as good as they were, I mean, you would never use them. Not you, meaning like anyone. I'm saying most people who are into beauty wouldn't use them, like banana hand cream. You don't want to smell like banana. I don't know anyone who says I really want to smell like banana.
Yeah, that's
great idea. Or a carrot, face thing. And they're great products and they worked incredibly well, but they're waxy and this. We brought in emulsions and we found a way to keep it preserved without using preservatives and things like that. So the team did a sensational job, and the broader way we marketed it brought in all the consumers. So
then you were acquired by Clorox. Is that, from an outsider's perspective, was it an unlikely marriage?
Well, it was definitely an unlikely suitor. When you think who's in your short list,
right?
You think about Johnson & Johnson and Unilever, L'Oreal, and people like that, P&G, but you would never think of Clorox. But there were a couple of companies like Clorox who came to the table. And I think Clorox saw an opportunity to, in my opinion, is they saw these trends in natural. They had Brita, the water filter, and that was kind of wellness inside you. And then they were launching this brand called Greenworks, which was going to be like kind of natural wellness around you. And then Bliss was going to be kind of that wellness on you. And so it was really trying to hit wellness, natural in three different ways. And I have to say, the transition from us to Clorox was as smooth and professional and responsible as I've ever seen in any transition, merger, acquisition, whatever. They allowed us incredible freedom. They supported us. They wanted to learn from us. They, slowly started bringing people in, and it was just such a smooth transition. I remember one of the people said, "We just want to make sure we don't hug you to death." It's a great analogy. And it went,
why did they say that, do you think?
Well, if they try to support you too much and try to put too much on you, you can't move.
Right. Which is, I think, one of the things that kills acquisitions, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they also understood they don't have any personal care background, so they needed to learn from us. So it was great partnering with them. And then after the sale, I committed to stay a year with them to help in the transition. And they've done just a sensational job since taking the brand over, learning it. The brand still operates in Durham, North Carolina, and Clorox, is in Oakland. So they haven't brought it in yet, and it's been years. So they've done a great job, and I give a big hats off to Don Knaus and everyone at Clorox. They've done just a super job.
I read that you and John Replogle, did I say his name right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Replogle.
That's a hard one
Everyone
for me to
does
say.
this.
Sorry about that. But I heard that you guys personally called customers that had reached out to you.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. What happened was when the transition happened, this is so funny. And it's not unlike what you're seeing, either politically and in a lot of other areas, is a lot of the people who are hardcore Burt's fans saw selling to Clorox as a sellout. Mm-hmm. And they said that your standards are going to change. They thought this was the worst thing that we could have done. And what they didn't know was Clorox did not buy us to change us. Clorox bought us to make us better. So we knew that, but they didn't know that. But you had people really upset. And I told John, I said, John, I think that you and I need to call every single person who sends us either an email or a phone call, but preferably a phone call. I want to call every single person and have a conversation with them. And we thought about it. We calculated how many it'd be and how many calls you have to make a day, and we agreed to do it.
How many? Just out of curiosity, how many calls was it?
Oh,
hundreds.
It was something in the realm of hundreds, in the low hundreds.
Yep.
And I remember calling up all these people, and I would say, with the exception of one person, everyone was blown away.
First of all, that the CMO is calling them and asking,
and having the conversation, as long as the conversation takes, and it was heartfelt. And their biggest concern, talking to them, was your standards are going to go down. You're going to put chemicals, and you're going to do this. And I said, not only is our standard not going to go down, our standard is going to go up. We're at 96% natural right now. Our goal is to be 99% natural. Clorox bought us to help us get there. And we went on. I had one person who just was not buying it, but they were very nice about it. And we went back and forth. And I said to her at the end, and she goes, "Look, I just don't believe it." I said, "I understand you. How about this? Let's mark our calendars. In 1 year, let's get back together and have the conversation. I'm going to call you. In a year, I'm going to call you. And then we'll see if I'm right or not. Because the proof's in the pudding. I can tell you anything on the phone."
Right.
And she said, "You know what? I got to tell you, you don't have to call me. The fact that you even did this is just so indicative of what this company's about. And I just applaud you for it. And I wish you the best. And I will be watching from the sidelines." She said, "I will be watching."
I was hoping you were going to say, and then I called back a year later.
Well, unfortunately, I think by the time this happened, I think I might have left the company by then. But the intention was to call. But she said, "No, please don't call." But she was just so taken. And the funny thing is, each of those people you spoke to, they're going to tell their friends, "You won't believe what happened to me today. I got a call from the CMO or the CEO of Burt's Bees because I sent a complaint in, and they talked to me for a half hour on the phone." And that goes so far.
Oh my God. Yeah. The impact of that is significant. Actually, a good probably lesson for many leaders. Let me ask you a question. So I think you were acquired by Clorox sometime around the Great Recession, right? And I read a quote where you said, while we're having such a big problem in the economy, that also creates a lot of opportunity. From your perspective, what was that opportunity for Burt's Bees? Because I think there probably was pressure, I'm guessing, on reducing costs, maybe changing what's in the product. Maybe if you could just share that with us.
I think there's a genuine, it's just a truism. When things are bad someplace, it's good someplace else. Someone's misery is someone's opportunity.
Yep.
Right? Let's just say the editor, the problem with that editors are having in having their stuff read in magazines is to the benefit of bloggers, right? So people wind up being successful and that's what looking at business is. I mean, the world's filled with opportunities, constant opportunities. And, when this thing happened, it got back to, listen, it is a tough time right now. Focus on yourself, focus on what's good for you, and focus on what's best for you. And Burt's Bees is what's best for you.
Right.
It's good for the environment. It's good for your body. You're putting on good things. It's a great value for what we're offering. We're not offering $100 skin creams. We're offering skin cares that work really, really well, that are good for the environment, that are good for your body, that does what it says, that doesn't overpromise, always over-delivers. And that's what you need to focus on. But it's in any part of the world, when something's going bad, someone else is going to benefit by it.
Is that a mantra of yours? You just said something that I hear. Actually, one of my mentors that I was thinking about reminds me a lot. You remind me a lot of him. And he would always say, under promise, over deliver. Is that one of your kind of mantras?
Oh, no, it's not. I wish it were. I overpromise and then try to over deliver the overpromise. And I think to a fault. If that's one thing I should only learn once is under promise. But I get a lot of, I get very optimistic and I get very excited about things, and I tend to push super hard like a bull, and then you want to make it happen. But yeah, I've a couple of things I would take back is some of the bigger promises I've made.
So I'm throwing a bunch of quotes. You said having that conscience, and this is a Burt's Bees, changes you as a marketer and changes you as a person too. Yeah,
it's so funny. I remember when I was like living someplace, and before they had recycling really, I was an early recycler, and I thought I was really kind of advanced. And then you get to Burt's Bees and you realize that you're behind where you really should be. But I think that so much of it, being at Burt's, changed me in so many ways. I think understanding the importance of culture in a company was very important, and just the importance of doing good by the consumer is so important. And, these aren't consumers. These are people.
Right.
And it's just so wrong that we refer to people as consumers. We never call them producers. We never call them the opposite. We call them consumers, like Pac-Man, just going around, chomp, 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 chomp.
Right.
They're people, and we have to take care of people and do the right thing. I mean, one of the things that is very big in that world is the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profits. And we believed in that. We developed a business model called the Greater Good Business Model.
Yep.
And the Greater Good Business Model was about maximizing the benefit to people, maximizing the benefit to the planet, and then maximize profits. It's not just about profit. So Burt's Bees changed me an awful lot, and as did Bliss, about the importance of happiness and the importance of taking care of people in a world that doesn't take care of them.
What's your perspective? So there's a guy named Daryl Brewster who I think was our third or fourth interview. In any event, he was the CEO of Krispy Kreme. But then he's now the CEO of a company called CECP. It's an organization, not for profit, or he calls it a for-purpose organization. They're very much focused on organizations focusing less on quarter-to-quarter profits and more on how they're going to make a positive impact on the world long term. Yeah. And they're actually hosting the first, what do they call it? The Strategic Initiative Forum, where 10 of the largest companies in the world are going to focus on what their long-term plans are with both a social and environmental impact. And he would assert, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but he would assert that if you actually focus on social and environmental, funny enough, you're actually probably going to be more successful in the long run anyway. So even though you may be doing it for the greater good, it's actually going to help you as well as an organization.
Absolutely. Can you imagine, if you look at one of the water companies, I think it was Poland, decided to take their little plastic caps and cut the plastic cap almost in half. It didn't go down the neck of the bottle as much. And aesthetically, at first, you kind of go, well, I'm an aesthetic guy, and it's not looking as good. But the amount of plastic it saved, so it's using less oil, right? Less plastic, less manufacturing of the plastic, lower cost. Less plastic then has to be recycled or gets thrown into a landfill. So it's a win-win. It's all wins going across. And there is a triple bottom line. It doesn't always have to be profit, profit, profit. I think there's a sense right now, and you're seeing it kind of, I think, politically in some ways, that it's business or environment, take one, right? That spending time on the environment takes away from business. And I think that's a very dangerous concept. I think that you can do better for the environment and at the same time be more profitable and be good to your people. But it's also a responsibility. It's a responsibility. At this stage in our evolution, if we're not doing the right things by the planet, we're not doing the right things by our people and everything else, I think we need to kind of re-examine what we're doing.
In many respects, so I think what you're asserting is that it's not just politicians, it's business leaders that need to take the lead.
Absolutely. Well, if they're not going to do it, who's going to do it?
Who's going to do it, right?
Yeah. And you know what the other thing is? Look, some companies it's easier, some companies it's harder. If your DNA is all about sustainability, like Burt's Bees and natural, it's easy. If it's not about that, it's hard, right? But even a little change could be huge, absolutely huge. And you have to make those changes. Yeah, we all have to make those changes.
I'm going to throw another quote at you, and I love this one. And actually, I think we've
I should
gotten a
stop
flavor.
talking so much. I say some weird stuff that now I have to respond to.
Well, your quotes are good. They do help out this interview. So this one actually, I think you've demonstrated that this truly is kind of who you are. But you said Burt's Bees is willing to do some very provocative, poignant advertising to make a point, knowing that not everyone is going to love it. And I guess my question for you is, how do you balance being provocative in what you're putting out versus going too far? Or did you not worry about that? Maybe that wasn't a...
Oh, no. I worried about it. I mean, I have to say that I tend to think more about what I think sometimes,
right,
to a fault. But I do believe, though, that if you're not, depending on what you're trying to communicate, if you're not ruffling some feathers, you're not making a difference. If you're not making a difference, you're not being different. If you're not being different, you're not making a difference.
Right.
You have to make a difference. And when you make a difference, it's going to change people, and it has to provoke some type of response. Do you like them to all be positive, but there's going to be some negative ones too. I remember when I was at Calvin Klein, my first week I was getting an orientation, and the woman who's in charge of consumer affairs, who's a brilliant woman, she was taking me through how they do the metrics or if they get too many complaints. Because Calvin's advertising back in the Obsession days, and were like, they did some crazy, and CK1, they did some very sexual things, some stuff. So they would say this many calls have this many percent, then we know we have a problem, and blah, blah, blah. So here's the maximum here and the maximum level this. So I said to her, do you have a minimum level? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you're Calvin Klein, if you're not pissing off someone, you're not breaking through.
Right.
I mean, if I did like what I thought was a really sexy campaign and no one complained, I can tell you right away it's not sexy enough. But when you start getting sexy enough that people are starting to complain, now I'm in the ballpark. Now this is good. You don't want to get too many complaints,
so
obviously.
It's playing in that sweet spot between the two different spectrums.
We were trying to tell people that, with Burt's Bees, that you're a part of nature, and nature takes care and provides for you. And we showed naked people in the ads, communing in nature. Now, we didn't show any naughty bits necessarily, but we showed people in nature. Like, it's your body, Garden of Eden. They didn't have clothes back then. It was no different than that.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, and we weren't trying to be, salacious or anything. And then we compared our ingredients versus synthetics. Like, we would compare beeswax to petroleum jelly, and we'd compare milk and honey to DMDM hydantoin, and show the difference between the two. And our testing was through the roof. We won awards for it. It moved our business forward. And we pissed off people. We pissed off competitors. We pissed off ingredient manufacturers. And I take that as a medal.
I love it. I think in certain respect, it goes back to you got to break some rules. There's some rules out there around what's tasteful and not tasteful.
Yeah.
And
who says I can't do that?
Right.
No one gets in the way of you as you. Everyone's going to say no. Just so if you think it's right and you can back it up, then do it. But don't
love that. Say that again. The thing that gets in the way of you is
the only thing that gets in the way of you is you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because I think that is actually what holds back a lot of people. It's like, you know what? Somebody's not going to approve of this, or is this the way it shouldn't be done?
Yeah.
It's all that. It's that voice in your head.
I mean, imagine if something hasn't been done before. The reaction of most people to something new is, well, it's never been done before. And so therefore it's not, and that's the parenthetical thing. Well, therefore it's not going to work. Therefore it won't be successful.
Right.
Instead of, wow, if you can do this could be, game changing. And that's what you have to do in this business, in any business.
Well, and if it doesn't work, there's probably a lot of learnings in there as well. So proudest accomplishment at Burt's Bee?
The proudest accomplishment, aside from the bemoans, was I think in having a vision and watching the vision come to life. And it goes back to that whole mission statement, is create amazing things, which was becoming this, putting natural on the map and being this natural powerhouse, working with incredible people all over that company, and enriching the lives of people. I think that what we did at Burt's was the exact manifestation of my mission statement.
Anything you would do differently?
I would have done a ton of things. There's nothing in my life I would have done differently. And if you speak to someone who said I wouldn't have done anything differently, then they're the least self-aware people, and they're the most arrogant people. I think I would have been much more sensitive to the culture. And I think I would have tried to be more persuasive rather than saying, trust me, this is right. And I think that's what I would have done differently.
So bringing people more on the journey, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, imagine you're a fast-talking New Yorker, from the beauty industry who comes down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and you're not one of them.
Right.
I mean, you're just not. I mean, and I'm not knocking anyone, just not.
Did you relocate down there?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. Not at first. At first I was going back and forth and I relocated. And that's their home.
Yep.
And that's their company, their history. So I think that's one thing I would have done over.
Well, based on your previous comments, so it sounds like culture now, your awareness of the importance of culture is very, very high. Maybe
absolutely.
What about, okay, so then you go from Burt's Bees, now you're at Bliss.
Yeah.
Fascinating backstory about Bliss, about how I think the lady was going to school in New York, was a trainer, started to take some skincare classes, opens up a spa, and then Bliss World becomes Bliss World in, I think, 1996 or something like that.
Very similar to the story of the founder of Burt's Bees. These very strong, very powerfully strong women.
I was going to say both were women.
Both
right?
women, they had visions. They weren't building companies to be sold. They're building companies to have their vision come to life. That's a big change right now in the world. People right now are building companies so I can sell it in 2 years, sell it in 3 years, sell it to a strategic, sell it to a private equity company. They were in it to grow their businesses.
Because they believed in the product and what they
just
were
want
doing.
to see. And you know what's so funny? When you look at game-changing CEOs, one thing they have in common is most of them, they're real kind of jackasses. And the reason why they're jackasses, at least they're seen as that, and they're not jackasses, is they have a vision and they're going to let nothing get in the way.
Yep.
So when people talk about how difficult Steve Jobs was or how difficult, even Roxanne from Burt's was, it wasn't because they were inherently mean people. They're not inherently, they're wonderful people. They just have a vision, not let anything get in the way. And you can love an employee, but if that employee is getting in the way of your vision, get them out. If you can't get them on board, get them out. And there's a lot to be said for that. So they're both real rock stars. I mean, incredible women, both of them. So she had this company. She had sold it to LVMH.
Yep.
Then LVMH sold it to Starwood Hotels. And Starwood sold it to Steiner.
And is that when you came in? When
Yeah,
Steiner? I think it was about the same time, yeah.
Yeah. The way I kind of wrote it was, LVMH was, and it's kind of interesting to know as backstory is, LVMH bought the company when they were buying a bunch of small brands, but they realized, I love the products. I just don't like all these spas. So Starwood, who has the hotel company, says,
Right.
I love these spas. I don't do all these products. So then Steiner came, and Steiner was a spa management company that had both. So Steiner wound up being a very, very good owner for the company.
I think that's where I first came into Bliss was Starwood, going to the W and being like, I love this lotion.
Right.
That was my first connection to it.
Going to a W hotel, try it in the room, and
Yeah.
I've been a customer of Bliss. I like getting massages at Bliss. So after we sold Burt's and Bliss called me, I said, oh, I love Bliss. I gotta do this. So I moved back up to Soho so I can live literally right in between our headquarters on Varick Street and our number one spa. I was 6 blocks in either direction of both places. So
what was the state of the business when you came in? Because you were the president. You were brought in as the president.
Well, it wasn't in a good state at the time. It was down 2 years, double-digit decreases. It was unprofitable. And we had to turn the business around. And it was... it's interesting. Also similar to Burt's, by the way, is a very strong culture. Up until my last day there, we always talk about you bleed blue. Because the color of Bliss was blue,
right.
So you bleed blue. And it wasn't without our, arguments and, all those things, different points of view, but everyone bled blue. They did what they thought was best for the company, always. So, our decision was that the play should be focus on the products. You want to bring happiness to the world. You're not going to do it by opening up spa after spa after spa. It's not as scalable. But you do it with product. So we focused on the product part of our business to grow that. And that really grew the business significantly. We had I was there for 6 years, and then we successfully sold that to Catterton, the private equity company, back in about November, December of 2015.
So go back to the bring happiness to the world. That, did you guys believe that? Like, was that mantra or that statement, did really everybody rally around it? Because it's funny that you just said that, because if you go to the website or if you do some research, that is like all over everything.
Yeah, our whole thing was achieve a higher state of happy, that we want to empower women and men to achieve a higher state of happy. And if you look at the trends, I mean, it's part of the trends in well-being, but it's all about the pursuit of happiness, right? And the world is challenged, and people aren't happy, and we wanted to bring that. So it really touched every single part. You want to be happy with the product experience, happy with the name, happy with the advertising, happy with the spa, but happy in a healthy way. I think at first we were provocative just for the sake of being provocative. We just make some really great jokes. And then it was more for purpose. It was about really more empowering messages for women. We'd have an ad for a cellulite reducing machine, and we'd have a picture of this woman using the machine on her butt, and it would say aspire,
Yeah.
So things like that. And interestingly, a lot of beauty brands started doing the whole funny punny thing, like Bliss did,
Yeah.
But we took that very seriously. It was definitely part of our culture. When we put the culture together at Bliss, positivity, being the brand, and results orientation were the top 3 values. We had 9 values, which was overkill, but everyone can say the top 3: positivity, being the brand, and being results oriented.
How would you inculcate that into the workforce? Because I think that's a challenge. I don't know if you've so many companies, you see the values and then you go on the wall.
Yeah.
And then you go ask an employee, what's our values? And they're like, I have no clue.
Yeah.
Even though it's everywhere.
I've been through companies where they give you little tchotchkes that you keep on your desk and your values thing. Look, you live it or you don't.
Yeah.
I remember in that book, From Good to Great,
Yep.
they talked about this one supermarket chain, and they would put the values in the elevator. And the comment was, if you have to put the signs in the elevator, no one knows what it is.
Right.
Either they live it or they don't. And we had a culture that was much more freewheeling, much more creative and positive, and obviously wasn't without its challenges. It's a business after all. You do have to make your numbers monthly and quarterly and everything. So that did bring, of course, its challenges, but for the most part, it was a very upbeat, positive working environment.
So it sounded like financially was not in great shape when you came in.
Yeah.
It sounds like you focused on products. Anything else you did to kind of quickly turn it around?
Yeah, well, I think it was products, expanding internationally. I think innovating, having some really great products, and we had some killer innovations. Some of them, like going back to one thing we spoke about earlier, just something that someone thought was just crazy. I had this idea to do a stomach tightening product that you just watch that women are just, as women are obsessed with many parts of their body, stomachs were very big, and women are doing bare midriffs and they have bikinis.
Right.
And I remember reading some study that if a woman is naked and is standing up and looks straight down and can see her stomach, that means past her boobs, then that makes her unhappy. So I thought about this idea for a stomach tightening product. And I remember telling my product development team, and they thought, a stomach tightening product? There's no such thing. It's crazy. Well, it goes back to, there's no such thing, so therefore it's not going to work. I said, well, here's the insight and here's why. And so, well, what's the insight? Insight, we want to look hot. It's pretty simple. I want to have a hot stomach. I'm a guy. I want to have a hot stomach, right? And we wound up coming out with the product. And I remember seeing this cleanser, this Oxy cleanser that is this tube with little nubs on it, and you use it on your rug to get rid of stains. And I got inspired by that, so we made that the package, and it wound up being the best-selling product for Bliss. And we wound up getting sold out all across Florida, New York, Hong Kong, and Las Vegas, because the Brazilians started going crazy over it. Brazilians would come up and just wipe out the stores. And Sephora was their number one best-selling item in the Hot Now section in history at that point.
Wow.
So it was a huge success for us. So you have to innovate, and you have some winners. And of course, when you're a small company, because Bliss is relatively small compared to L'Oreal.
It's about 700 people, I think I read, or something like that.
Well, in people, it was big.
Yep.
Because we had all the spas. But in terms of dollars, it was small compared. We're up against, billion-dollar companies with Lauder, L'Oreal. We're relatively small, so you take more chances. The good thing is, if you fail, it doesn't hurt as much. If you win, you have a big home run.
Right.
So I think we did that. And we also changed the spa, and we added some more services, and we tried to be much more relevant, and we're doing men's waxing because men were getting into
I've read
grooming.
that. There was an article. Yes, I read that. Yes, that was interesting.
But, to me, it was like a no-brainer because it was getting big and men were waxing.
Right.
And Entourage would always, the TV show Entourage would always talk about Bliss for some reason. And but we also had a challenge internally getting the estheticians to be willing to give men to wax men. They're going.
So you had nothing to do with the placement in Entourage. It was just
that was the placement in Entourage was before me.
Ah.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for that.
So what about culture? When you came in, was the culture kind of what you were looking for? Do you have to make any changes there?
The culture was there. I think the structure wasn't, I think, right for what we wanted to do. And we had the previous president, who was a wonderful guy and is a good friend to this day, had a different style than I had, and he had a long list of direct reports. I wanted to keep the direct reports short. And I did something, though, that was kind of interesting. You can go into a company and say, here's what we're doing, and you're the president, you can just make it happen. But I didn't want to come across that way. So what I did was I hired this HR expert, and she came to the company, and she interviewed all of the top people, all the key people.
Yep.
What's on your mind? What's working? What's not working? You tell me. So they told her everything. Not me, they told her. And they told her a lot of things that they were opening up about their frustrations and their challenges and everything. And she consolidated it and then presented it back to them with me in the room now and someone from the parent company. And they said, it looks like the three issues we have are, we have a challenge that there's not a clear vision in place. We have a challenge that there isn't clear decision making. And there's a challenge that we haven't integrated with the parent company as well as we'd like. So that's when I said, okay, so this is where you guys said, now let's make a plan to address all three, which comes across very differently than me coming in and saying, here's your three problems.
Right.
They're like, who the hell are you? You just started.
Well, it's almost like a Jedi mind trick to a certain degree because you got them to articulate almost your plan going forward.
And it also just speeds up the process.
Right.
And we wound up, so I said, we're going to put a vision together, we're going to work together. And we worked 6 months together to develop the vision. And it was a whole, with all these people, about 19 people, we developed the vision and then we put it in place. And then we made an organizational change based on the vision. Because you need to know where you're going first.
Right.
Then you decide who you need. And then we made some changes there, which was good, and we streamlined the structure and grew the business. We grew the business over 30%, 35% over 5 years, which
wow.
in a category that grows 3% a year, to grow the business profitably over that time was quite wonderful.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
What about your products? They're very whimsical. Was that? Obviously, it was conscious, but maybe if you could talk about it, like a lot of the names had whimsical kind of names.
Yeah.
What was the thought process behind
Well,
it?
yeah, again, it goes back to the whole ethos of happiness. And what we learned is that in some categories you have more license to be funny, in some categories you don't. So with body products, you can talk about Fat Girl Six Pack, Fat Girl Slim. Fat Girl Slim was based on the rapper, on the DJ Fat Boy Slim.
Yeah.
So they did Fat Girl Slim, and then all the Fat Girl products came with it, and then we had the poetic waxing, and we had a bunch of products like that. So we always did that. When you come up to like higher level anti-aging, the appetite for humor is a little bit less. So we had a line called Firm Baby Firm, which was something that I named, and then realized maybe not the best name for women who take that stuff really seriously. So you make some mistakes and you learn for the next time. But that was always part of the ethos, because there's a whole bunch of stuff and it looks so serious. They stand there like little soldiers on the shelf and they're pristine and beautiful packaging, and we just want to shake it up a little bit. We want to be seen in the store. You go into a store where there might be beauty advisors, and a lot of them there aren't. You won't find beauty advisors. So people are on their own. So we're waving our hands saying, pick me, pick me. And you have to make sure the packaging really reached out to people.
So let me, You've talked a lot, I think, about the transition of beauty to well-being, and it seemed like there was a conscious decision to almost repurpose Bliss to a certain degree in 2015. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Maybe if you could talk about the background on that.
Yeah, it's happiness is so much part of your well-being. It's interesting when you look at even something like Huffington Post and you look in there. They have a section on living.
Yep.
If you go down, one of the sections is happiness. And I've had this conversation with Ariana. You have it upside down. Happiness should be on top. What leads to happiness is a quality of life, good relationships, good health, good this. That leads to happiness. And we believe that happiness was the kind of the umbrella under which all these things fell.
Right.
So we want to stand for that higher purpose.
So highlight of Bliss. And then maybe
I think the highlight of Bliss also was like just having this vision of going from a spa company that has some products to being a happiness company that helps give you the best products and services to help you achieve a higher state of happy.
I love it. Anything you do differently?
Oh, a lot of things I would do differently. Again, it's like laundry lists in each place, but I think that when you have a small company, people make a bigger difference because there's just fewer of you.
Sure.
So picking the right people who don't just have the skill set, but have the right cultural fit is so important. In a big company, you can have the person who's wacky, disruptive, and all this other stuff because they're going to hurt a company, but not that much. In a small company, one bad ingredient, it's like if you have this massive soup, you'd put a little onion in, no one's going to taste the difference. If you have a cup of soup and you drop an onion in, it's going to stink up that soup. And I think that because all about the people, I think that maybe there were some people issues I would have dealt with differently.
And maybe sooner.
Yeah, sooner. But that is sometimes the best person and you love the person and on paper they were perfect and all, but they might not be best for the company, in which case it's just time to just kind of move on. But I think that would be the biggest learning, and that's learning that unfortunately will probably always happen.
Right.
Because you don't know.
You want to give people the benefit of the doubt, I think, oftentimes.
And like as a guy who likes people, and I enjoy people, perhaps too optimistic sometimes.
So A or B, attitude over skills or skills over attitude?
Well, the easy answer is C.
Okay,
A plus B equals C.
Both?
Both, please.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in companies where we've had people who are so the company, 1,000% the company, but don't have the skill set. They're not right.
Right.
And you can have the skill set, and if it's just going to work against the best interest of the company, that's not good either.
Yep. So let's talk about you left Bliss, and now you're out on your own. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's funny. I decided that it's funny, if you remember when I was talking to Cheeseborough Ponds, I said I'd be there for 3 years, then I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to start
my own business.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that was like 3,000 years ago. And after Burt's Bees, I was going to start my own company. But I went to Bliss. After Bliss, I said, now I'm going to start my own company. And I just felt if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And I'm just so excited and enthused by watching these people who start companies. And so I'm working on 4 separate things.
Yep.
But the thing that I'm really focusing most on is this well-being project. And it's really a give back. And it looks at the work that I've done in my career, really focusing on the last 2 on Burt's Bees and Bliss. And it's a give back on how to improve a person's life, on how to improve their personal health, their personal wealth, and the world around them. And the insight is that a person, let's say you, Mike, you have the ability to get to the weight that you want in half the time it would normally take you.
Yep.
You have the ability to cut your stress in half. You have the ability to save the money you want in half the time. You have the ability to cut traffic in half. You have the ability to cut pollution in half. You have the ability to cut the damage to our environment in half. You have the ability to do all that at the exact same time. Okay, and the concept is called halving. And the promise is that you can have it all, and that's HALVE, have it all.
So it wasn't halving. I thought that's what it's halving.
It's having, but
Having.
it's HALV, so it's cutting it in half.
Yeah.
And the concept is by taking mindful approaches at what you consume and what you do, and make hard choices in the way you live, you could actually improve your personal wealth, your personal health, and the world around you. So I'll give you an example. And the example I use is a true story. It happened at Burt's Bees. And that's how I came up with the idea. Our head of internationals, a Brit, comes in from to Raleigh,
Right.
orders dinner, and he gets his big salmon, big pile of French fries, big salad, big Diet Coke, and he goes, look, I can't possibly eat all this. So next time I come here, just give me half of whatever I order. So I thought about it. If he ate everything, and we typically eat everything that's on the plate, you have twice as many calories, which means twice as much food, twice as many calories, right? You gain twice as much weight, it takes you twice as long to burn it off, makes you twice as guilty, twice sick to your stomach, twice as unhappy about it. If you don't eat it, then half the food winds up in the landfill, which doubles the landfill. Half of the soda winds up in the waste stream, doubling that as well. Well, that's pretty obvious. What's not obvious is, think about the opposite. If he only ate half, ordered half rather, if
Right.
he only ordered half, then they only need half the salmon, which means they only need to fish for half the salmon, which doubles the salmon population. You need half as many fishing boats, which use half as much gas and half as much oil, which causes half as much pollution in the air and half as much pollution in the water. Okay, when they catch the salmon, they catch other fish too. So half of that goes back into the wildlife, and that population doubles as well. Then you need half as many trucks taking the fish from the docks to distributors and to the restaurants, which use half as much gas, half as much oil, half as much maintenance, half as much traffic on the road, which means they'll get there twice as fast. You also need half as much inventory, which doubles everyone's free cash flow. You have as much energy. So the benefit of him saying, I only want half the salmon, is a greater salmon population, lower costs, lower impact to the environment. He winds up saving money.
Right.
His health is better and the environment is better. He also helped himself, and he also helped people all the way down the stream. So the benefit chain of any one decision is massive.
And what's interesting is, yes, it's got a positive impact on the broader environment, but the impact that it has on you personally is in many respects, I think, the draw.
Absolutely. I mean, simple, like the average family of four goes through 400 gallons of water a day. Shockingly, 400 gallons of water a day. So obviously, if you cut that down, it's 200 gallons a day, right? If you cut that in half. But if you do that over the course of a year, an average family of four, if they cut out half their water, which is very easy to do, they can de facto manufacture 1.2 million 8-ounce glasses of water. They can start their own water company. One family can produce 1.2 million. And how do you do it? By, thinking twice about how often you leave the shower on, how long you take your showers. Do you leave the water running while you're washing your dishes? If you use a dishwasher versus hand washing, you use only 10% of the water, right? So are you using a 1.6 gallon per flush toilet bowl or a 3.2 gallon per flush toilet bowl? Do you automatically pour full glasses of water? Once you pour that full glass of water, that water's dead. That's not being used anymore.
It's not coming back, right?
So I only pour water when I'm going to drink it, and if I'm not going to drink it, I'll drink the whole thing because it's better for my health. It fills me up. I won't eat as much. So it still continues that whole benefit chain.
What I love about the halving too is it's very easy to remember. It's almost like there was a book, 10% Happier. I know we keep talking about, but it's very evocative. Like 50% is something that gets people's mind around it really quickly.
It's easy.
Yeah, it's easy.
It's so funny, and it also talks about like your finding joy in life, and
right.
where your true joy comes from, and about the idea that we always have to buy and buy. I mentioned this before. We're not consumers. We weren't put on this earth to buy stuff.
Right.
We're put on this earth to live and to find happiness. And it's sad that we're thought of as consumers. How much are you buying?
Yeah.
And we should think about people. And one thing that we're talking about in this movement is, what are your true sources of joy? And I'll just tell you this really quick story. I met this guy, and he's a middleweight boxing champ. And we just got to know each other very intimately. And he was telling me about his life story. And his life story was not a good life story. It's a very sad, tragic life story. And he wound up becoming champion. And he's telling me his cars and his houses and stuff. And he's telling me all of this stuff. And he said, well, what kind of cars do you have? I said, well, I don't have a car. He said, you don't have a car? I said, no, I live in this city. What do you need a car for?
Right.
Take a subway anywhere I want to go, walk any place I want to go. He goes, well, you have a house, right? I said, well, I have my apartment. He said, but you have another house, like a summer house? I said, no, I don't have a summer house. I don't have anything like that. He goes, well, you own your house. I go, I see where you're going. Let me make this easy for you. Here's what I own. 6 guitars, a laptop, and a TV. That's pretty much it. I don't have anything else. I have books and clothes, but I don't have anything else. And he goes, what makes you happy? I said, meeting you. That makes me happy. And I struck a nerve with him, and he said, I want that.
Wow.
I said, I want to be your friend. I said, you are my friend. So, it's not from buying that thing necessarily.
Right.
It's just have a great experience. And you're seeing right now people are spending more on experiences than products, but as a trend. But it's really finding your source of joy. And, maybe if you're doing a lot of retail therapy, maybe you kind of just need therapy. You don't need to buy more stuff.
Where are we going to see halving come out? How's that going to come out into the mainstream?
Well, I want to create a movement. I want to make this something that's big and global. The website's being built right now. I'm hoping that we're going to launch in about a month. There'll be a book that will follow, do public speaking. I want to work with companies that are like-minded in this. There's amazing companies out there who are practicing this in some way, shape, or form. There's a chain of... a UK chain that's in the States now of sandwich places called Pret a Manger, and it's called Pret everywhere, P-R-E-T. And they serve half sandwiches. You buy full or half, half salads, and then all the food that's not eaten goes to a food bank. I mean, that is just the perfect business model. And you feel good eating there. It's People, Planet, Profit. They're so far ahead of so many people. The amount of food that we waste on a daily basis it saddens me to no end that people are starving around the world, starving in our own country, and we throw out tons of food every single day.
And a lot of times it's not our decision, like you said. It's like you're at a restaurant and it comes and either you eat it and you go overboard or you don't eat it and you waste.
Yeah.
So you want to hear my story that you can add this to your presentation?
I'll take any stories I can.
I cut 50% out of my water bill by doing one thing.
What?
And no, actually, I shouldn't even say cost. The usage by 50% because
don't
they
tell
have
me
those
stop
crazy.
Showering.
Well,
don't.
No, I'm not gonna.
I mean, aside from that,
so I live in California, huge drought.
Yeah.
We changed our grass from regular grass to synthetic.
Really?
And literally, I swear to God, month to month, going from first month to second month, 50%. Boom. Didn't change anything else, but we just stopped watering our grass. And we still have plants and stuff that are on drip and stuff like that.
Right.
But just because we stopped watering our grass, it went down 50%.
How's the grass feel?
Well, so what's funny is, and I'll show you pictures, when you look at the synthetic grass, most people are like, is that real or is it fake? And the only reason they think it's fake is because, there's not the brown spots because your dog goes to the bathroom or whatever. You almost cannot tell. That's how much it's advanced.
Wow.
And then we've had huge rains, like our dog will run out, barely will even be wet. So the drainage is incredible too. So that's my contribution. Literally 1 month, 50% change.
Part of what I want to do is on the website is have a place where people can give their suggestions like that.
Yep.
We want to build that up and share that knowledge because when you're doing something as expansive as this, because it's your home,
yep,
it's the office. How do you cut your emails in half? How do you cut meetings in half? It's everything because it's everything everyone wants.
If you could cut my email in half, I'd pay you.
Yeah. And there's so many little things you can do to cut your emails in half.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Like a lot of us have Google alerts that we have alert every day. And if you change your Google alerts to once a week, well, you're cutting out, 1 email a day. You're cutting out 6 emails there. You're getting rid of all of those things that you really don't look at. And there's getting people off CC lists. There's a million ways to cut down on emails. It's funny. I remember when I would go on vacation at Bliss, I would tell everyone, listen, don't email me. I won't come back to 3,000 emails. Don't email unless I absolutely need to know, and don't call me unless there's an urgency. You can't make the decision. The number of emails I would get would be nothing. And of course, you get back,
a great idea.
and then they blow up again.
Right.
Now, part of it is, he's back now, I can send it to him again. Part of it's me, maybe I'm micromanaging a little bit too much. But really, no, guys, go back to the way it was before. It's okay to go back to the way it was before. Don't send me that stuff. Because no one wants to spend their life going through emails all the time.
So, where do you draw your inspiration from? So you have a lot of crazy, cool, interesting ideas. Where do you get inspired?
I honestly get inspired every single day. I just see opportunity in so much. I guess part of it is just leading a life of positivity, and when you're positive and you're happy, your receptors are wide open, you see things differently, you connect with people better and faster. Opportunities come, people want to share opportunities with you. And when I hear something, I think, what can we do with that? Not in a money way, but just what can we do with that?
Right.
So that's it. If you go, I think you could probably draw a correlation between people who are happy, positive people are probably more likely to find these opportunities than people who are negative and kind of closed down. Because
closed down, the opposite of that's curious. It seems like that's kind of probably a key trait of yours.
Curious.
Super curious.
Yeah.
What's the next disruption in marketing, do you think? Or is there?
I think it's funny. The challenge with marketing has always been you're selling, but you want to be authentic, right? And sometimes they seem like oxymorons. Like, you're trying to sell, which I'm trying to convince you, but I want to be authentic. And you're seeing this huge trend of authenticity. And I think when the authenticity starts with with bloggers and things like that. You see with microbreweries, you see with little barbershops, you're seeing the change. But when the marketing flips over and the authenticity is so pure and so real that you can't help. And you're seeing some brands do that well. Brands like Warby Parker and others, where the marketing is the authenticity. The authenticity is the marketing, that they're the same and they're not at odds with each other. Because right now, everyone knows, like a lot of the bloggers who we're paying big money to them. So is it really authentic anymore? Don't know. People still think it is to some degree, but a lot of people don't think it is. But I think the disruption in marketing has become where marketing and authenticity is the same thing.
What's your views on social media? Like maybe how you can use it positively for your organization? I think there's a lot of companies that don't do a really good job. You have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think, it's the hardest thing because it's herding cats. Like no one has the right answer. I don't think anyone has the right answer. But I do think is people have an appetite to do three things. They want to view it, they want to share it, and they want to comment on it. So if you can provide something that is sexy enough that they want to view, that is interesting enough that they want to share, and grabs them enough they want to say something about it, that becomes the viral nature of it. So if you can do those three things, that's great. So it's not just about getting stuff out there.
Right.
It's trying to hit those three things.
About being thoughtful. Actually, I've never heard that structure. That's a good way of thinking about it.
I made it up.
I like it.
It's true.
I like it. What's the one question? This is my last question. What's the one question that somebody has not asked you in the past, or maybe I didn't ask you today, that you've always wanted to answer?
That was the question.
No. I hope it wasn't just the social. I'm sure that's not it.
I don't know. I think that's a really hard question. The question that no one's asked me that I've always wanted to answer is like I don't know, maybe it's like, when do you stop? And the answer is, if you love what you're doing, you don't.
You don't.
I mean, I love this. I love spending my days doing what I'm doing right now. I love spending my days doing what I did before. I'm fortunate enough in my life I can shape and make my own choices in what I do, but to try to make projects happen and do business stuff and social good and things like that, it's always going to be there, Yeah, when I left Bliss to start my own thing, people said, "Are you going to retire?" Why did I retire? I found that was kind of an ageist comment, but I'm a kid, I'm a puppy. I got 50, 60 years left in me, easy.
But I would argue probably the nature, well, maybe not the nature, but the rhythm of your day probably looks a lot different now.
Yeah, it is funny. I work as hard or harder, but it never feels like I'm working.
Right.
You'll feel exhausted maybe, but you realize, I've just been at this for 10 hours, or I've just been working in silence for 3 hours, just cranking out, work on one of my projects, and you just feel great about it at the end.
That's a place where we all want to get to.
Yeah, but I'm in a different situation, and I'm just happy to be in it right now.
Great. Mike, thank you. That was great.
My pleasure. Thank you. That's great.
Hey, I want to thank everybody for listening to Resilient. I've been blown away by how many people are coming by and listening to these little podcasts. It's actually making me so much more fired up to go find these great leaders to interview. This is a Deloitte podcast, and you know what? I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Rivet Radio, who has been producing these podcasts since day one. They are an absolutely incredible partner to work with. Now, you probably already know because you're listening to the podcast, but if you forgot where to go, you can go to Deloitte.com, or we are on pretty much every podcatcher out there, like iTunes. That's what I use. Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google, Spotify. I was actually sitting down with my 8-year-old the other day, and I was like, hey, Caden, check this out. Daddy's actually on Spotify. So that was pretty cool. But we're now on Spotify. We're getting a lot of people coming through from them. And you know what? I'd encourage you to go back and look at some of our episodes. I love looking at the library now. I know it's kind of geeky, but I look at the library of all the different interviews that we've had so far. Let me just point out a couple that you may get some value out of. The first one, Bill Roper. And I'll tell you, I think I've gotten a lot better at this since the first one, but it still was a fascinating interview. And Bill was fantastic, where he talked about coming back from the stock backdating crisis. Or Mandeep Grewal, who headed up customer experience at United. Or even Daryl Brewster, where the interview was so good, we had to split it into two. He's the CEO of Krispy Kreme, and now the CEO of CECP. And you know what? If you like these conversations, and I hope you do, I would be so grateful if you would just share it with some of your friends, colleagues, maybe even some of your family. Like I've said before, my family's actually starting to get a kick out of them. And I'd ask one other favor. If you have a minute, if you could just provide a rating, I would be so grateful. You know, ratings play a pretty big role in how much the podcast gets promoted on places like iTunes. Finally, hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter with any comments or recommendations for future guests. You know, I've been blown away. Once again, I say this every single week, I know, or every 2 weeks, but I've been blown away by how much social engagement we're getting. So hit me up. I respond to every single person. My profile is under Michael Kearney. Last name is spelled Kearney.